Hi everyone. Today I'm playing with carnations and I wanted to show you a pretty simple way of painting these that's really pretty. I even put in some washi background, but you don't have to do that. These would make a really pretty card. If you've ever watched me, I paint on the little Strathmore watercolor cards. They're quite fun. I buy them by the boxfuls and I paint on them all the time, and that's my cards I give to everyone. And I can link that in the bottom if you like. But today I'm using my favorite, my Artisto pads that I basically buy by the 30 pack because they're very economical. And actually today's Prime Day. I haven't bought anything yet, but so I don't know if these are included in that, but if they are, I'll probably get myself some more because I love them. They're really reasonable. They're 140-pound cold press. They've got a great texture and they're very reasonable. Because I'm obviously painting a lot, they're reasonable. They don't warp. They've got that good texture, and you can actually, they're perforated too. So if you wanted to remove your little painting, you could very easily. Today I'm also using the My Lang palette because I really enjoy this palette, and for how much I'm painting, it makes sense for me. It's a little better price point, and getting a little bit low, honestly, on some of my Winsor Newtons. Today I'm going to be using their Madder Red, which is this color right here. It reminds me of a little bit richer version of Opera Rose, which is Winsor Newton. And then I think the other color I'll use is probably some of this Cad Yellow and Orange. So let me just swatch that for you so you can see. So this is their Red Madder Red. And it's really quite lovely. I like it a lot. I'm just gonna lighten that up a little bit so we can see the different values that we can get by just adding some water. There you go. And then I'll use their Cad Orange, which is right here. And these are always my favorite two colors to put together. I just think they blend so beautifully. And then I'll just pull that out, lightening it up so you can get an idea of the different values by adding water. And then as always, I mix my olive green and let's see, in the My Lang palette, this is called Tree Green, and then I'll use their olive green as well. And I really like the Tree Green, but as you can see, it's a little bit bright. So I mix it with their olive green, and that gives me the perfect green. It just warms up that tree green a tiny bit, but it still has those undertones of that really pretty bright green. So let me swatch that for you. There you go. And then I'll add some water and just pull that out so you can see the different values. Just like that. There you go. And today I'm using my Princeton number 8. This is the flat shader, and I'm using it because I like this angle, and for these carnations they have that kind of frilly edge, and I think this does a really good job with that. I might add in, we'll see, but I might add in a little bit of their rose red. It's quite dark, so, but I could maybe use it for a few little highlights. I think if it was used in a wet on wet area, it might be pretty. So we'll kind of see how that goes. And then that is that darker orange. Okay, the strokes I'll be using today will be, let's see, let me grab some paint. For the most part, I'm going to be holding my brush almost horizontally, and that's going to give me the ability to kind of move around, shake my brush. Let me show you here. Let me grab some paint. So I'm going to be using this type of stroke, just this back and forth, and then varying the height, and occasionally laying down my brush and just kind of wiggling it. So this is how I create a lot, and today I'm just showing you the carnation on its side. So we're going to be using something like this. Okay, so just practicing kind of that wiggle back and forth to get that frilly edge. And really important here to leave these white spaces so it creates some fun and some interest. And then we'll go back in and be adding some washy oranges, like so. Okay, well, I don't want to get too far ahead here, but we'll be doing some things like that. And then making sure we're working wet and wet, because what I'll want to do is go in and this kind of this signature part of a carnation that I always notice is they've got kind of this bulb at the bottom, and I'm leaving some white there. So in working wet on wet, I'm letting these blend, and then just some thin strokes for the petals. And I also notice, I'm running out of space here, but I notice the leaves, I'm going to use the tip of my brush, go up, push down, and come back. I notice they tend to bend a lot, so I'm going to be using something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to just very lightly pencil in where I want to place my 3 carnations. So I will place one up here. I always like using this 3 type of look. Place one right here and place one over here. That's kind of my thing. So there you go. Okay, so let's get started. I have my 2 containers of water also, one to wash and one to rinse. And let's get started. I'm going to pick up some of my Cad Orange, and that's also called Cad Orange if you've picked up that My Lang palette, which is really great, by the way, for beginners because it has so many color choices. For the beginner, it can be a little overwhelming trying to create all those colors, so I think it's really great. You don't have to worry about that. For my first layer, I'm going to use a little bit lighter value, just meaning there's more water. And let's just get started. So we're using that kind of frilly, leaving lots of white space in between. And I'm just moving my brush around and creating all these wonderful little frillies, because that's what reminds me of a carnation. I'm going to dip into my paint a little and just maybe touch in like that. And then before that dries, we'll be going into that some more, but let me wash and rinse my brush and just tap it off on my paper towel. And let's go in with our green so that we can kind of get a little bit of bleed here. So again, this is what I'm using a cotton because it came out a little bit dark. Use a little bit of paper towel there. So this dried a little bit quicker and I didn't quite get that blend that I like, but that's okay. So that bulb is what is so recognizable to me with the carnations. And then just using the tip of my brush on its side and coming down. So very light pressure. And make sure you're resting your hand on your paper, because I know for me there's no way I could get a straight line unless I had my hand kind of grounded. And I don't want to get too much into the petals right now. What I will do is bring a little bit of that orange and just touch into that pink, because I think it's always so pretty to mix some of the flower color in there. And what I might do is use a tiny bit, let's create a little bit darker green. So if you look there, that's got a lot of pigment, it's not moving a lot, and less water. And I'm going to dab in here, just like that, okay? And then maybe add some little squiggles, because I notice, and I'm just using the corner of the brush, very light pressure. I notice these little carnations have a lot of those squiggles. And let's go on to our next carnation. So washing and rinsing my brush. And we'll come back to this and add some darker colors in there. Let's go on to our second one, and I think that's where I will use that madder red, which isn't to me much like a red. It's much more like a pink. And we're going to do the same thing here. So having my brush pointed about maybe 2 o'clock and just going in, and important to leave these white spaces, remember, in between, because that really creates some beautiful interest. And I'm using the side of my brush and just really wiggling around, just like that. And then we'll go in and add some more interest to that. Maybe doing another layer back here. Like this. I'm just touching in now with, while it's wet, with a darker value. Just kind of touching in the tips, letting that. So notice all the white space in here I'm leaving, which is really important in all paintings, but I think like these with a flower that the petals are very dense and all together, it's important. Now before it dries, I want to go into my green and using kind of the side of my brush, and see, this time I did that sooner, so I am getting that beautiful blend. And then that stem, using the top of my brush, very light pressure, and a little bit of that darker green, just tapping in here and there. And anytime I can get in and add other colors with, while it's wet, I always do that. And then these little squigglies that I always see on these, just using barely a light touch. The other thing I'm going to do before this dries is go in with a tiny bit of that pink and just dab in. Just kind of brings the flower, it brings this beautiful cohesiveness. And I think for the last one, let's do a little tighter bud. So let's go in with, we will go in again. I think I'm going to use the pink. There we go. And we're going to make this one a little bit tighter. So I'm actually using right now, because I can't set my hand down, a little bit more the top of my brush. So this is a little bit tight here. Hasn't quite opened. Just kind of dabbing in and moving my brush around. Now, before that gets too dry, I want to go in and add a darker value, just meaning I'm using a little bit more pigment, and go in and just tap in while it's wet and let that kind of spread. And look how beautiful. Washing and rinsing my brush before this dries, go in with my green and create this little kind of bud. And making sure again to leave that white space, so important. And bring it down. So yeah, I kind of like that. Now let's go into this orange. And I'm going to grab actually a little bit more orange with a darker value, so less water. And get that ready, and then rinse my brush and scrape it off a little bit. That's my rinse water. And I'm going to go in and just, that's too much water. So I'm just going to tap it off, and I'm going to go into the tops here and just kind of add some water, kind of feather that out, dipping into my water again and my paper towel. I kind of like that. Now what I'll do while it's still wet is go in with that darker orange, and I'm just going to add it in and let it spread in that water that I just put there. Let it kind of spread and bleed. And this is what is so, so pretty about watercolors, is being able to get this really fun spread and bleed, okay? So I quite like that. Just maybe touch in a little bit more here and there. Yeah, that's really pretty. I like that. Okay, so I'm washing and rinsing my brush, and I might just go in here one more time with a little darker value. So quite a bit more paint. It's not moving as freely. And I'm going to go in and just touch in here and there. What I really want to do here is maybe do the same thing I did with the orange and just wash and rinse my brush. Scrape it off a bit, not too crazy. Might even, oops, dab it off. See all that water that came off? And let's just do the same thing. Let's just gently feather out some of these edges, not going completely all the way around. You want to keep it some light spaces in between. Something like that. I think that's so pretty. There we go. And then I'll go in and just touch in with that deeper value and let it kind of blend like that. Just at the tips. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that pretty? Because these carnations to me are so frilly. And then we might even add in a little bit here. Something like that. Okay, Now let's create a few leaves, and the leaves are really fun with this brush because these leaves tend to bend, and I'll show you what I mean. So they tend, I'm kind of holding this, hopefully I can do this. So here is your stem. They tend to, using the side of that brush, come up, and then they go down, up, and then they come down. So they have these little bends, and I did notice they're a little bit shorter than traditional leaves. So I'm going to add a few in here, side of my brush, like that. So kind of short and bent, like that. And then making sure is always to add in some darker values. So those look like they're up front. Creating that interest. This one looks like it's a little farther behind. And don't be afraid to go over another flower there. Just make sure it's dry. And then let's create with the corner of our brush some of these squiggles coming out. There we go. So I quite like this. I think it's pretty good just as it is. I might add in another leaf or two, point, something like that. Maybe one in the background here, so I'll water that down, lighten the value. Like that. And there you go. Maybe a really light one here. So let's really lighten up that value. The lot of water. And that kind of looks like it's in the background. So there you go. I think these are really easy. They would be just beautiful on a card. As always, I can't leave well enough alone. But I kind of liked that. There you go. These would be really pretty on a little card or, you know, just a little painting that you could frame. I think they're really fun. And I hope you have fun with them as well. In my little kit, I will create that digital download and you'd get all of these. I'll name the colors here, which I'm using my Ling, and then I'll give you a little swatch sheet with the brush strokes, and there you have it, everybody. I hope that was fun for you, and I think these are really pretty. All right, happy painting, everyone. Bye-bye.